That's
But
no,
like,
for
like,
sure.
like,
My
yeah,
career was
as a real
over
quick,
a
just as a
couple
real quick
weeks ago.
reframing, like,
Now I'm
just
just
say,
Hold on.
just say,
Just add in Keith, I want to ask you both the same question. Is like seeing that back and forth between Nick and Destiny. Is there anything in that back and forth that should have been censored? Is there anything that could have, that could be considered hate speech or could have led to violence and should not be allowed on X or any other platform?
Look, I think it should be up to the platform itself. If a platform wants to censor certain types of hate speech or certain types of incitement of violence, I think they should be able to do that.
There's a pretty interesting debate hosted on Twitter not too long ago. The whole thing is about an hour and a half. And it was over free speech and internet censorship. And in the one corner, we have Destiny and the Krasenstein brothers, Ed and Brian. I'm sure all of you already know who Destiny is, but the Krasensteins are two twin brothers who are political commentators who are part of Resistance Twitter. And this was this movement on Twitter under the Trump presidency where they're acting like this brave, intrepid opposition to the big bad orange man. And all three of these guys are acting as apologists for the status quo. They are defending the power structure. They're saying, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Everything is functioning as it should be. And in the other corner, we have Myron, Sneeko, Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes, and Keith Woods pointing out the obvious. So let's look at some of the arguments that are made.
Even despite sorry to interrupt you, Ed, but despite the amount of influence they have now compared to 10, 20 years ago, like if you give them that right now and they all just meet in one room, they can essentially control speech around the world.
Yeah, but I think that's their right as a corporation. I don't,
Ed, what's the platform's primary objective?
The platforms. What platform are you referring to?
All of them. Why do social media companies exist? What's their primary objective?
To make money.
To make money. And you're saying that they should be allowed to ban certain speech they don't like if that allows them to make more money, correct?
I believe, as in capitalism, I believe that's the way it should be.
So if Pfizer came along and decided to give a bunch of money to one of these social media platforms, would they allow anti-COVID vaccine conversations and speech or vaccine injury proof on their platform, or would they censor it to make as much money as possible?
I think it's up to them as a corporation to do as they please, just like Donald Trump with Truth Social has censored liberals from his site.
You see this very basic, naive, classical liberal approach to free speech that Ed Krasenstein takes throughout this entire exchange. So he just acts the whole time like there's some sort of meaningful competition, a meaningful free market between companies. And the rise of alternative media has chipped away at the stranglehold that the legacy media has, but there's still clear power structure. There's still clear incentives. There's still a clear narrative that's put forward by our cultural and social elites that is expressed through the mainstream media, and that's really what Destiny and the Krasenstein brothers are trying to obfuscate in this whole interaction. Andrew Tate refers to it as the Matrix. The Krasensteins don't really seem to know what they're doing. It does seem, just from the way they talk and the arguments that they make, that they're genuinely just naive and clueless NPCs who don't understand what's going on. Destiny, on the other hand, is clearly here in bad faith.
That's fine, but we're talking about people getting
I think Elon Musk has the absolute right to run it the way he wants to do it.
That's fine.
And under his terms, that as long as something doesn't break the law, and I guess that can be subjective to some, like what's going on in Brazil. I think that's his right, and I think if that's the best way to run it, that his platform will probably succeed.
Cool. So vaccine. I understand what you're saying. So vaccine injuries do exist. However, the platform's objective is to make as much money as possible, and Pfizer is funding the platform. So they're going to pretend vaccine injuries do not exist. So they are purporting a false version of reality. They are creating and aiding the Matrix and making people believe a version of reality that is not true, primarily for financial profit. And those with the global centralized capital can control narratives and can control the world even at a better level than most political parties. Would you agree with that?
Unmute,
wait, Pfizer is not even worth that much money. Why would we assume Pfizer can control speech on...
Stephen, Pfizer isn't worth that much, Bonnell. You really see what people are able to get away with? You can just lie. if you speak quickly and confidently enough. It doesn't even matter the content of what you say. You can just lie and have a huge following, and people will just believe whatever nonsense you say, all because of your delivery. Pfizer's net worth is $162.5 billion, and they are the largest pharmaceutical company on the planet. Yes, they do have the ability to buy politicians and influence speech.
It's an example,
Yeah,
Destiny.
see,
Ed, go
so
ahead.
you keep blaming it on the advertiser or a company that's paying these companies. It's up to the media companies, it's up to their shareholders, what's in the best interest of those companies. That's how capitalism works in America. That's what I think most conservatives embrace. They embrace
Pfizer,
capitalism. Let the companies make up their own mind. If one business
buying
idea
all
is
the
failed,
speech
is
on
not going to
all the
work out.
fucking-
If
it's
people
such
don't
a
like that, they're
stupid
going
idea.
to move
It's so
to another
childish.
platform. And we're seeing that with a lot of people who are moving away from Facebook and onto X because they don't like this level of censorship they're getting on other platforms. So they move to X.
Here comes the just move to another platform, bro argument. You can see Destiny kind of grumbling in the background there, and you can get a sense of how he's bad faith. Like Destiny, and to a lesser extent the Krasensteins, the main theme of their argument is just an argument from incredulity. The whole time you can see Destiny being bad faith there, but I think you can also see how the Krasensteins are naive, because he's like, oh, well, don't conservatives agree on this point? Like, he doesn't totally understand who he's arguing against. There are elements of the right that are critical of certain aspects of capitalism, like the whole Andrew Tate, Manosphere plus Nick Fuentes movement is implicitly paleoconservative. Hence their shared opposition to the Daily Wire's brand of conservatism, but Ed Krasenstein isn't able to distinguish between these camps.
So they move to X. Just like the media, that you can watch Fox News, you can watch News Nation, you can watch, there's a plethora of different media outlets that you can consume if you don't like what one media outlet's putting out there. It's not the government saying, oh, the media can't talk about the Pfizer vaccine or say that it has side effects.
And the truth is, that's a pretty low bar, because going, oh, well, the legal framework of the United States says that you can't go to jail for saying XYZ thing or voicing XYZ idea is a low bar, because we have a managed democracy. And we have an elite that exercises censorship by proxy. This elite outsources censorship to corporations, NGOs, and other proxy agents which enforce conformity through mechanisms like deplatforming, boycotts, and public shaming. And what Destiny and the Krasenstein brothers do the whole time is just pretend like this system doesn't exist.
If that would be an infringement on the First Amendment. But in capitalistic society, these companies can run the way they want without government interference. So if the government starts interfering and saying you can't run your platform how you want, then that's going to be the government interference, and that's going to be against the First Amendment.
Okay, well, that's another argument, because there was Twitter files and there's a whole rabbit hole. People
well, and the
more
Twitter files
than
also,
me.
I mean, the Twitter files showed that a lot of stuff went on. People requested a lot of things to be removed. And Twitter, being a publicly run company, publicly held company, they made up their mind on what they believed was best for their
Let me
shareholders.
simplify the question. Do you believe the people? So what you're effectively saying, we agree on the fact that those with the money can control certain narratives and how they're perceived and discussed. Would you agree with that?
That is the core claim of the right in this discussion.
Those with money definitely have more control, yes.
Yes, and they can control on a public forum how certain things are perceived and discussed because they have the money. And when I say advertise, what I truthfully mean is donate and lobby. That's what they do. They donate and lobby to platforms to get their point of view.
Yeah, of course, on certain platforms they can, but on certain platforms they can't. Like, let's say X, for example.
Well, absolutely, because it's free speech. So this is where we're going back into I'm only going back over this because we talked about it earlier when you guys were saying the primary objective of the media is to make money. And I said,
that is the primary objective. I mean, there's really no arguing that.
Okay, well, if that's their case, then they're going to take money from the large centralized power structures, and they're going to purport any false version of reality that it takes them to make as much money as possible, and people who donated the money to make as much money as possible. Objective truth has nothing to do with anything.
If that's in the best interest of the shareholders, perhaps. I'd like to think that shareholders have an ethical side of things too, and if they see that happening, they're not going to be as interested in investing in that company. So, I mean, I think the board of directors and the shareholders are going to have the ultimate say there. And I don't think most people want that.
Oh, perhaps. This is beyond naive. It's laughable. This sort of thing doesn't work on X anymore because you had a bored rogue billionaire buy it up and then actually make it free speech. Although even then, it seems like Elon has walked it back slightly and he's caught a lot of hell from it from the media. All the liberal outlets were pissed that he did this because now they no longer have control of Twitter. The left no longer has control of Twitter as an ideological opinion-shaping apparatus. And there are, of course, also, I think Elon also fired a bunch of people from Twitter too. There were tons of people who still worked at the company who, even though Elon bought it and said he wanted these new rules, were undermining him. We're going behind his back and running things the way they used to be run anyways. Corporate Democrats like these, like Destiny and the Krasenstein brothers, are unable to acknowledge that they represent the interests of the power structure.
Do you think, hold on, Ed, do you think you were censored for money?
I didn't hear you.
Do you think your account, you and Brian's accounts, were banned for monetary purposes? Did they make more money by banning you guys?
No.
Do you say that contradicts the point?
Our accounts were banned because
they broke the rules, didn't they?
They thought we purchased our accounts, which we didn't.
No, sorry. What I meant was they thought you did. It wasn't because you had said like an impact on society, and that's the reason they wanted to ban you, right?
They banned me. Yeah, they banned our accounts because they thought we were breaking their terms of service.
But I would add that was a business decision that they thought would help the business. So
do you think Andrew? Sorry, Brian. I thought it was Ed. Brian, do you think Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes, they were banned because the platforms wanted to make more money? Because Stripe wanted to make more money, they banned them.
Yeah, I do. I think that they saw them as somebody hampering advertising.
How whipped do you have to be to defend the system that banned you for monetary reasons? It's so cringe.
Or hampering.
And do you think do you think this model is flawed, where advertisers
hampering their image? I think hampering their image, which hampers their revenue, right?
Let me ask.
That's just an alibi.
Let me ask a simpler question. So you're saying effectively that mainstream media will lie for money, correct?
Well, I mean, if you lie as a mainstream media outlet and you're caught in that lie, it's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt your revenue.
That's not what I asked. I'm asking, do you if I use Pfizer because it's the example we used earlier before Destiny has a breakdown. If Pfizer come along and they are sponsoring, donating, advertising, lobbying, whatever you want to call it, X amount of hundreds of millions of dollars to your news network, and you're talking pro-vaccine, would the mainstream media lie for money?
And this is the other excuse that Destiny and the Krasensteins make. Oh, well, lying would cause damage to the reputation of these institutions, so it's not in their interest to do so. But it is the case that the benefits, the payout from twisting the narrative on behalf of these very interested parties like Pfizer and Lockheed Martin outweighs the damage to their reputation. Because CNN, for instance, is like too big to fail, in a sense. It's simply too large. A segment of American society will watch it regardless of what they say. True or untrue. And we have seen massive erosion in the trust that the average American has for these large mainstream media outlets.
So yes or no?
I mean, I think that depends on the individual who's making that decision. But I mean, if I was running the mainstream media, I certainly wouldn't. I mean, I think you have a reputation. If you get caught in a lie, that's going to hurt you monetarily in the long run. It's going to hurt you from a standpoint of...
that would be true unless your primary objective was to spread lies. And for you to be paid to spread lies, and as long as you spread the lies, you continue to get paid because nobody buys what you sell.
Look at Fox News.
Nobody gives a shit.
Well, I don't think none of these companies have the money to solo fund like an entire social media platform. Like, I feel like the analysis stops with, if somebody pays you $100 to lie, will you do it? The answer is yes, but everybody that's a large creator on this platform knows that if you got paid $100 to lie, you wouldn't take it, because if people found out you were lying, your losses would be way more than the little bit of money you'd get paid to do the lie.
Destiny lies like a rug and people still believe it. They're also neglecting to acknowledge the fact that people's attention spans are very short. Like, people's memory for these things is, like, very, very small. So when one of these narratives that the media pushes is then later exposed as a lie, it's usually months after the fact. And the problem is that during this period where the media is pushing this narrative, all dissent, all countervailing forces or opinions are censored on these major platforms like YouTube, used to be Twitter as well, Facebook, etc. That's the issue. And then these large companies claim that they're combating misinformation or doing it in the common interest, for the common good. When in reality, it's at the behest of these other large companies. And so many people are brainwashed, indoctrinated by these propaganda campaigns that it kind of doesn't really matter. You know, enough people are none the wiser that it's not really a problem yet for these companies.
Yeah,
That's
crazy. People pay you even though you lied about your marriage not exploding.
Kind of like, Nick, how you lie about every single thing you do. So, for instance, we were talking about deplatforming, and Nick is talking about the blacklist that we're on. The only reason Nick, by the way, is blacklisted is spam reporting people. That's the only reason I
Andrew, but what you said is that I think the media will lie for money. I think you're right there, and I think Ed cannot disagree. But then, isn't that going to be their downfall? Like, this is not
well, this is the
because
thing.
they eventually lose trust.
Well, this is the missing element. They will lie for money, and then we're talking about how that's going to damage their reputation, which has happened. Nobody trusts them. Nobody believes them anymore. And everyone's missing the very obvious point that it's their job to lie for money. They've always lied for money. They'll tell any narrative they're told to tell by the big money and the big finance. That's the only reason
who
they exist, is to lie for money. Why would they?
Who are they?
Why?
Like,
let me
can you name an individual? Is it the CEO of CNN? Is it, who?
It's global. It's going to change, right? The COVID-19 narrative is different than the Ukraine narrative. Perhaps they're all on the same team, but
yeah, but
it's
you
people
can't
with large
everybody.
I'm sure there's power.
I'm sure there's some people who would lie for money.
Hold on.
I'm sure there's some people who would lie for money. You're right, but to say that the mainstream media would lie for money, like everybody in the mainstream media, their goal is to lie for money, just to put money in their pockets, and they're willing to tell lies. That's ridiculous. I mean, you're judging every individual person.
Argument from incredulity from the Krasensteins here. Also, implicit in what he's saying is the assumption that these people even really understand what they're doing to be lying. They could still totally think and tell themselves that whatever narrative they're going with is in the interest of the general public, America, or the world community as a whole. And of course, that doesn't make what they're saying true or not harmful. I think part of what's holding the Krasensteins back here is when they hear the word lie, they have this image or feeling, this sort of scene plays out in their head of everyone at these companies taking a big bag of money with a dollar sign written on it, having little devil horns coming out of their head, holding their hand behind their back with their fingers crossed going, eh, 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 eh. Like, no, it's obviously the actual interactions aren't going that way. It's not, that cartoonish. But what it amounts to, the narrative that they spin, is a lie, is harmful. And there are countless contradictions which some segments of the general public have been aware of, have been able to see through. And this is why people trust the mainstream media less and less.
It's not ridiculous. It's why they exist.
No, it is. It's absolutely ridiculous.
The mainstream media...
If they promote vaccine misinformation. People were all losing their jobs if they were to promote anti-vaccine content or anti-vaccine misinformation, which has direct harm to the people that are getting these injuries. Like, we're talking about a misinformation that has direct harm to humans. And Andrew's bringing up a point where if they lie for money when Pfizer is paying them, which they did during COVID, and then they're not reporting on vaccine injuries, then this is a lie that has direct harm to humans. Wait,
are we saying should those be banned? Should that be made illegal? If you lie and you get paid money for it, should that be like a free speech thing where you're in trouble for that?
More evidence of how Destiny is bad faith. He's trying to pigeonhole them. Oh, well, should you go to jail for that? Like, he's just trying to trap them in something. He's trying to prevent them from pointing out how there are clearly tons of perverse incentives and how the system isn't functioning in a way that actually benefits your average person by asking questions by demanding a solution to people who are just trying to highlight a problem.
Well, here's the pertinent point, though. I feel like we're missing, guys. I feel like we're missing a very pertinent point. The only reason mainstream media exists at all is to lie. I don't know why we're trying to pretend that's not the case. The reason it exists and it's pumped out free everywhere all of the time and forced on everyone's throat all of the time in every single lobby everywhere is to lie. They get their objectives that they're supposed to purport to the populace. Their job is to lie. And to sit and say, well, if they lie, they won't be trusted. Correct. Nobody trusts them. Correct. They've been lying for money all this time. That's exactly where we are.
The mainstream media is an opinion-shaping apparatus and is a tool of the elite who run this country, and if you can't recognize that, you are an NPC.
Yeah.
So how is this confusing for anybody?
So Andrew, when does a media outlet become the mainstream media or part of the mainstream media? At what point?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, you have state broadcasters for a lot of countries, and I'm sure that in each different country, you have their state broadcaster with their particular narrative they want to push and enforce. I'm sure the Chinese state broadcaster and the Russian state broadcaster and the British state broadcaster will look at the same series of events with a completely different spin and a completely different narrative that they'll try and push to the populace, which they think is best in their national interest, which means it comes from above. It's not organic. It's not just accidental. They put together the narratives they're told to, and they push it to the population. They're professional liars. That is their job.
Yeah, but don't you think that every media outlet wants to reach that point of being considered the mainstream media, because that means they're the biggest media in the country? So at a certain point, you become part of the mainstream. At a certain point, you become part of the mainstream media, right?
Those five.
So at that point, do you just start lying? I mean, it's a ridiculous narrative. Sure,
what's ridiculous to say that there's a free market for media. There's 5 major conglomerates that own most of the media. So to pretend this idea of they're rising and falling and they're in competition. There's 5 major
they rise and fall.
That control most of the media. And
they really don't have a whole lot of competition. It's an oligopoly. We live in this corporatist system that won't admit it's a corporatist system, which is really what's frustrating. And they don't have a whole lot of competition except for alternative media. But then this alternative media exists on these social media platforms like Facebook or YouTube. And that's why these alternative platforms have been so highly regulated. This is an inarguably real aspect of society that the left would otherwise highlight as an issue with capitalism. But now you have these three apologists for the status quo, Destiny and the Krasenstein brothers, pretending like it's not an issue, because now people are waking up and seeing, oh, who really controls society? Who's really influencing things? Who's actually shaping public opinion?
There is some, within margin, but nobody would ever say that some tiny publication that could be founded by an individual is going to blow up and compete with the big 5 conglomerates like News Corp, 21st Century Fox, and Disney.
And they wouldn't let it. And they wouldn't let it. Guys, let's be hyper realistic here. I said earlier about the control of people and influence over people is the only true war. Tanks and bullets are the last resort to do that. It's much easier to use social media and narrative control and the MSM, et cetera, to control a populace as opposed to putting them all at gunpoint. The idea that you can just stand up and tell the truth and you're going to have a broadcasting organization inside of the UK bigger than the BBC and you're just going to talk against the government and you're just going to tell the truth and be Mr. Honest and they're going to let you get bigger than the BBC without catching a fucking bullet is asinine. Look at what's happening to people who have Twitter accounts. Not just my story, Nick's story, Alex Jones' story. There's a bunch of people with Twitter accounts who end up in a cell for having a Twitter account, let alone a broadcasting corp. To sit and believe that, who becomes the mainstream and you can just go and make a news channel and maybe you'll get in. It's one big club and you're not in it.
Libertarianism is such a naive ideology. It's a complete joke.
And it's control.
So Andrew, you haven't answered my question before. So when you say the mainstream media, are you talking about, let's say, Chris Cuomo when he was on CNN? Are you talking is he being fed this information that he's only
I'll be honest. I'll be very honest with you. What I think of mainstream news broadcasters, I think they're idiots who are dragged from obscurity and they sit down in front of a teleprompter, and I think anybody can do their job. And Don Lemon's monumental failure has proved that perfectly, because since he left CNN, nobody's given a shit. I think he has 500 views on any of his videos. He's some random idiot they plucked from obscurity, sat him down, he read the teleprompter. It's not about who reads the teleprompter, sir. It's about who decides what's on the teleprompter in the first place. That's the actual discussion we're having here. It's nothing to do with which jackass could sell his soul and sit down and read the garbage.
So many of those shows that individual whoever has that show, they have their team, and they're not necessarily being fed everything they had to say. They're allowed to have opinions themselves.
My friend, and I call you my friend, so you don't get
I'm glad you're calling me
I'm about to call you an idiot. Because you're an idiot, sir.
Tucker Carlson said the exact same thing, that he had basically full editorial.
Didn't Tucker get fired for having an opinion that went outside of the narrative of Fox News?
No, Tucker got fired because he almost cost Fox News $1 billion for lying on air. It's funny that you defend the fact that he had an original opinion. What you're actually defending is misinformation and lies, which is supposed to be something you guys are against, I thought.
There's been no official reason given for why Tucker Carlson actually left Fox News. So Destiny going ahead and positing this as though it's some sort of set in stone fact is ridiculous.
Which opinion was this? That's not what I heard. Tell me, please educate me, Destiny.
The Fox News, the Dominion lawsuit. There were texts that were leaked from him where he admitted that he was lying on air about claims that Sidney Powell had made to him, and he was tired of lying to his audience about things about the Dominion voting machines being rigged.
Well, I don't know if that's a lie at all. Firstly,
you don't know anything because you don't read any media. That's why you're out here saying things like they get marching orders from everybody. You don't know how any of these media companies are structured. You don't know where the teams get their information from. People that work in media are the most social media hungry people in the universe. You think that all these people in all these networks across all these countries are getting fed the same marching orders and nobody's leaked anything, nobody's complained about anything, nobody's said anything? And why do we think that mainstream media is any more insulated from these problems than alternative media is? You guys will make fun of the marching orders from mainstream media, but I bet every single alternative media guy in here is anti-vax, thinks COVID came from a bioweapons lab, thinks that Russia has a right to invade Ukraine, thinks that all the charges against Donald Trump are made up, thinks that we shouldn't be supporting Israel. Like, you guys have literally copy-pasted the same opinions between every single one of you, and you guys are talking like an army of NPCs about how the mainstream media gives you fabricated opinions. It doesn't even make sense.
Here is Destiny's great appeal to his audience who may happen to be watching this far. It's, you guys all agree, see, you're the real NPCs. This is whatever the left always does this. They always go, nuh-uh, no, you. And the idiots who happen to be invested in whatever media outlet or internet personality is making this accusation just clap like seals and go along with it.
Yes, we do all think the truth. That is...
Oh, crazy how truth can be a perspective there, huh? But when you all think the same thing, it's not a conspiracy, but when the mainstream media does, it is a conspiracy. Crazy how that works.
Leftists are never properly able to identify hypocrisy.
I just said that different state-sponsored broadcasters would have conflicting points of view.
But they don't. Do you watch any media? Have you followed any media?
Course,
they don't typically have conflicting opinions. When you're reporting on international media, the stories are more or less the same.
And a BBC segment, they often directly conflict.
No, very rarely. On the facts, no. Maybe if you're watching a pundit or you're reading op-eds, they will. But if you have any amount of media literacy, a really great example that works against your Israel stuff, by the way, was the reporting of that Al-Alasi hospital bombing, where everybody was saying that Israel bombed that parking lot. Every single mainstream media outlet in the world ran with that story for 2 days. I mean, how did that work if Israel controls the media? Or how does that work if they all give conflicting accounts and reports?
Andrew Tate literally never once said throughout this entire exchange that Israel controls the media. Destiny is such a dishonest snake and a liar, and you see it over and over and over again throughout this entire exchange.
It's because they don't. It's because everybody relies on people that are reporting on the ground. It goes through their media teams. They publish what they think is right. Sometimes people fuck up. But there doesn't have to be a top-down conspiracy to explain why.
The sure did change the headlines very quickly, Destiny.
After more information came out. Yes, sir. That's how it works.
When fake news came out.
This is so naive. There have been so many lies specifically about wars. It's insane that you would even bring that up. Before the 2020 election, there was a big story about how Russians were putting a bounty on the head of American soldiers in Iraq. You remember this? And they said Trump is allying with Russia, who's killing our soldiers. Then a year after, and by the way, that's after the election, they came out and said, yeah, that wasn't true. They came out and said, see, well, we source our intelligence on the ground. Some of it has a high degree of confidence and some of it has a low degree. And this one had no degree of confidence. But it took them a year to correct it after it had already served its purpose. Same thing with the Hunter Biden laptop. They totally put the lid on that one because they said, we were told it's Russian disinformation. Turned out to be authentic after the election, just like the 40 beheaded babies. 40 beheaded babies, 40 babies, and their heads are off. I can't believe it. And then they found out in December, after Israel had already invaded, after they blockaded Gaza, everything. They said, oh, yeah, that was all fabricated. It's a complete lie. Same thing with Ukraine. I remember when we debated, they said Russia blew up a nuclear reactor because they're trying to do another Chernobyl. Turned out that was bullshit. So those are just like off the top of my head, 5 examples about 3 different conflicts where, they reported it serves its purpose, and then they revise it a year later after they got what they wanted. And you, because you believe their alibi, because you don't understand the distinction between power and powerless, between government and people, you say, no, I think they got more information. They found out that the propaganda that they created for their efficient purpose, they found out that was a lie, because, these are just really earnest people like you and I trying to get it right, as opposed to very interested parties in government, finance, wherever you find it. So those are just a few examples off the top of my head. They learn more information, just like in Iraq,
maybe people just
they
get
learned there were
stories
no
wrong.
weapons of
Maybe
mass destruction
it's
in Iraq.
possible because it happened on the other side too. How many people were saying?
And there you have it. Maybe people just get stories wrong. That's the big argument. Oh, it's an oopsie. It's an oopsie. Money doesn't really influence news all that much. It's just one big oopsie. Sometimes people get it wrong. This guy is so full of it. This is one giant apologetic to obfuscate the fact that this country does have an elite and to cover up what the interests of this elite are. The reality of the matter is that with classical liberalism, selfish individuals employ democratic forms of government to make the state an executive organ of their own business interests. That is, by paying for elections and newspapers and controlling the opinions of voters and readers. Thus, liberal democracy, generally, is an unholy alliance of urban masses, cosmopolitan intellectuals, and finance capitalists. The masses themselves are manipulated by the latter 2 elements through their specific agencies, the press and the mainstream political parties. And to keep this illusion up that we live in some sort of free and equitable society, this system gaslights the public and tells people that they're actually free.
Oh, there's no way that Russia's going to invade Ukraine. That's bullshit. The U.S. intelligence must be lying because Nick said that they lie about the intel all the time. Well, guess what? That happened. Oh, well, there are no fighters in Al-Shifa Hospital. That can't possibly be the case. Oh, whoops, we found CCTV footage that shows otherwise. Oh, no, hydroxychloroquine is a way better drug than remdesivir. Like, oh, this is going to be the ivermectin is going to save all of us. Oh, looks like none of that was true. Oh, people get things wrong. Some people lie. Like, you have to be intelligent enough to call out fault. That wasn't even a syllogism, dipshit.
That's a false syllogism.
No, that wasn't even a syllogism, dipshit. Listen, people get things wrong sometimes. You have to be more intelligent. You've got to be more sophisticated when you go through media, and you have to understand sometimes people they get shit wrong. Sometimes people do lie, but why the you trust people who in alternative media who are like teams of like 1 to 4 highly ideologically driven people versus entire media conglomerates that are being fact checked or have dozens or sometimes hundreds of workers in some of these offices. Like the ability for you to lie about something is going to be way higher.
Involvement? How much do you know about the CIA's history of influencing media?
What an amazing question. I don't know. How much do you know about?
I often don't hear people like you and Ed and Brian digging into the history of the national intelligence state directly influencing media.
Because history is different. Like
normie idiots who are very willing to talk about the historical wrongs of this, that, and the other alphabet agency, the CIA, the FBI, what have you. They're very willing to talk about those things as they occurred historically. Like, they love to talk about MK Ultra as an example. And I'm not saying that MK Ultra wasn't really bad and wrong, but they have this weird wall, They're very willing to say, oh, the American government's bad, and it does this, and that, and the other. But they'll only cite, examples from over 50 years ago. They're not conscious to the operations of finance and government as they exist today. Their analysis stops at 1970 or so.
If you want to talk about U.S. foreign policy between the 40s and before the fall of the Soviet Union, that's going to be a different type of foreign policy, a different approach than our foreign policy over the past 34 years. Also, the ability to sneak or hide different things is going to be different when everybody is carrying around a video camera and a recorder. The ability to do things covertly is a lot easier back in the day when people were typewriting to each other or.
I have to go.
I have to go. So I want to ask. Buried. Yeah, do your thing, Andrew.
Sorry, brother. I have to go, so I just want to ask a really quick question. Destiny, I want to understand your worldview, because you and I have a different worldview, it seems, especially on girlfriends, etc. But
any Destiny fan who has somehow watched this far into my video, I want you to know you are a complete tool.
We won't go down that path. Do you think it would be prudent and professional for a country to allow its state broadcaster, which speaks to its populace, to report whatever it wanted and whatever it discovered without any kind of moderation or input, even if it was directly adverse to the goals and aims of the national security of said country or the military-industrial complex of that country? Do you think they would allow the state broadcaster to just report whatever it wanted fairly without anyone telling them what to say or any narratives to hold, even if it's directly counter to the interests of very powerful entities within that nation? Do you believe that we operate in a world that fair?
Yes, because confidence is a valuable thing. And if your country doesn't trust you, doesn't trust the media, if it doesn't trust the leaders, and if you've got ways to hold them accountable, like via voting, then yeah, if you fuck around with your population and people find out, you're going to be held accountable for it. Arguably, that's why Trump won his election.
Arguably, that's why Trump got elected. And then right there, we have an admission that Tate's position is correct. It's astonishing that people still follow this man. Unbelievable.
You know, you can say that like, oh, well, the media lies to everybody and everybody lies to everybody. That might be true. Fine. Then why the fuck should we believe anything any of you guys say, right? At that point, you're in an epistemic, nihilistic black hole of nothingness where you can't believe anybody.
Terrible argument. If we can't believe the mainstream media, then why should we believe you? Haha, gotcha. Man, Destiny followers are just absolutely have their heads in the sand. Literally, his argument was, if we can't trust the mainstream media, then we can't trust anyone. How do we know the truth at all?
The fact that you believe a country X, will have military aims, it will have agricultural aims, it will have political ambitions, it will have trade aims, whatever they are, to compete in this globalized market, and they need their population to believe a certain point of view to be as competitive as possible against the other nations, and they're just going to allow their state broadcaster to broadcast whatever they want, even if it's counter to their own narratives and interests, is so ridiculously naive. That's not what happened.
It's not naive. You don't even understand how markets work. You know what naive? No, hold on. Naive is thinking that companies with a market cap of $100 billion have more say in our government than like
the Daily Mail starts talking about war with Russia in the UK only a fucking couple months ago. Endless war with Russia, conscription, how it needs to happen. On a dime, all of the BBC, all of the British news starts talking about how important it is to go to war with Russia, because that's the aim that they had from their military industrial complex. And the broadcaster and the media arm of the government works directly with their foreign policy aims. It's all directly going together. Not a single newspaper printed, "This is dumb shit. Nobody should go to get their ass whooped by the Russians."
Destiny and people who think like him don't have a sincere response to this point that Andrew Tate just made. They just have deflections. Because it's true. Andrew Tate is directly analyzing the interests of governments. And what do people like Destiny and the Krasenstein brothers have to say? They obfuscate.
Not a single one, because they are not allowed to.
If that's the case, then why didn't Trump shut down all negative media about him when he was president? If that's the case, why didn't Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Barack Obama shut down all negative media about them? You guys bring up the best counterexample to you is that Hunter Biden laptop story. Why did that get censored for one day? Why wasn't that story completely
that
killed?
Wasn't heavily suppressed.
Yeah, no, wait. Right. Why wasn't that story killed completely? That is the most talked about story. Your example of media censorship is like the most talked about story in the past 10 years of online media.
Complete lies on Destiny's part again. We had tons of media outlets for many months gaslighting the public and saying that this is Russian disinformation.
It's talked about online on social media, yes, but it was suppressed in the MSM, which is the exact point.
No, it was suppressed on Twitter. The New York Post story, the big deal about that, the big deal about Twitter was, the big deal about the New York Post story was it being suppressed on Twitter and Facebook, but it came back in like a day. So the question is if the government was able to control things so well, why didn't they shut that story down completely?
Again, another argument from incredulity, which is sort of aimed at a straw man of what Tate actually said. Tate is not saying that there is an on-off switch and a story can be killed absolutely and completely. After there is enough evidence for something happening, then the MSM will have to report on it anyways. The MSM is able to aid the elite in suppressing the truth, but it's not always perfect.
Destiny, let me ask you a question on that. Isn't that because they censored it because there was a specific reason to do so? Because the reason you censor it is because you want the election to go in a certain way. Once the election's over,
tell them to do that. Didn't the intel agencies tell them to suppress that?
No, if you actually read the Twitter files, I know how much you hate reading. If you actually read them,
experts.
No, they didn't. No. Nobody told Twitter to censor the New York Post story. They literally leaked the emails where they talk about censoring the story. I don't know why you guys say the intelligence agencies told them to do it.
So all of the mainstream media all ran with "this has been debunked," and they all cited the letter that came from the National Security State, which was signed by 51 intel operatives.
They didn't say that it was debunked. They said it looked like Russian misinformation, which, if you're honest, it did. But it did.
They started all of their articles with that statement in order to frame it in the exact same way that Nick was saying that every article about Nick is framed by the first sentence being Nicholas J. Fuentes, this, evil things, so that when you read the article, you're pre-framed to believe Nick Fuentes is an evil human.
Ian Carroll, the speaker here, has it exactly right. It's not simply direct contradictions of actual fact. Like, it's not just an outright, the car that just went by us is red when it was actually blue. It's more about spin and framing. That's where the lies come from. All these different mainstream media outlets suddenly toe the same line, suddenly start with the same talking point on this specific issue of public interest. And you're telling us that there's no intelligence agency involvement in this? Come on. We are not children. At least people who aren't liberals or Destiny fans aren't children.
No, it's not even remotely the same. It looked like a fishy story. Any honest actor, like, I'm pretty sure at this point we all know the laptop story is real. But even looking at it, it's
like that is a story.
Yeah, obviously. I'm sorry. Hold on. The idea that Hunter Biden dropped off a laptop years ago to like a blind computer store owner, yeah, that is a sensational story. That sounds like bullshit. It still sounds like bullshit.
Did you know that it was reported that Hunter Biden was probably on Ashley Madison back in 2015? Like, this is totally in line with his character and his behavior and his modus operandi, if you know anything about the man. If you're not a complete NPC like Destiny is, and just sticking your head in the sand selectively in order to fit whatever narrative power has told you to go with.
Even if it's true. But again, like, the deep state has so much control sometimes, like censoring stories, but it couldn't have prevented the New York Post from publishing it. Why? It couldn't go and like take that hard drive out of Giuliani's. Giuliani had balls. Oh my God! So it only takes one journalist to shut down the entire. Also, by the way, like a quasi-mainstream media journalist. This is the New York Post. It's not like we're talking about like a small YouTube channel or something, right? So even the New York
published that story, and then the entire media narrative had to shift in order to discredit the story as quickly as humanly possible. And the entire national security complex mobilized and got 51 of their top experts, like ex-director of the CIA, ex-director of the NSA, the people that had architected their entire national security state, the people that had lied to us about torture, that had lied to us about WMD.
Yes, I understand. You can talk about things from 20 years ago. That's fine. But the reality is,
discredit the story as quickly as possible.
And look who broke it. The most mainstream media people in the world. Giuliani had a copy of the drive. This is a mainstream ex-mayor of New York. And then the New York Post, a mainstream media publication. Giuliani was not mainstream? How old are you?
And of course, he's got to resort to name calling, as though the New York Post is not a noted dissenting right-wing media outlet at this point, even if it is technically mainstream.
So let me ask you.
No, wait. I want to hear the answer. Wait. Hold on. I want to hear this. You don't think the New York Post counts as mainstream media, and you don't think Giuliani wasn't a mainstream political figure in the United States of America?
New York Post absolutely counts as mainstream media. What I'm saying is that a singular journalist got the scent, got the trail, and decided to write the story.
But I'm asking, how is that possible? And that was a mainstream media publication. How would that be possible? The CIA and the NSA and the FBI are controlling all these things.
You clearly haven't done a lot of research on how the CIA actually do influence.
And your mic is really bad, but just so what you're saying, Destiny, is that the letter that was signed by...
Quick, Mario.
Go ahead, Keith. Go ahead.
saying is that when you actually research how the CIA influences journalists, it's not like journalists are literal robots where the CIA has a literal game controller where they actually like move their mouths. They peddle influence through payoffs or through like promotions or through just making friendships. Like, it's not as simple as just saying we literally control everything that everyone says. That's not how the world works.
Destiny is literally obfuscating the process by which the American government influences the mainstream media. You know, it's easy to understand how most people are NPCs and it's easier to go along, get along, because that's just how the world is. But you see stuff like this and it's like, come on. How can't you see through this? It's so glaringly obvious.
No, it's not. Hold on. No. It's easier to censor one story by like contacting a journalist and threatening his family than it would be to falsely get like every single intelligence agency or like 51 different officials on board with censoring a story. It doesn't make sense. It would be way easier to get the one journalist guy like to just like show up at his house and steal the drive.
Not necessarily. And again, here's how you see Destiny obfuscating, because people in these institutions have common interests. People in the intelligence community, so-called, have common interests. One of the single biggest predictors of the way a person will vote, beyond even their sex or their race or ethnic background, is their vocation, their job. So no, it's actually not that hard to find 50 guys in the so-called intelligence community who agree on something.
Experts work for them.
Destiny.
Well, hold on. Well, Comey works for them. The DOJ works for them. Why did they pursue the email investigation with Hillary? Why didn't they just kill that immediately? Why did Comey ever make those announcements publicly? It hurt him a lot. Why did this story with the DOJ with a special prosecutor come out with Biden being senile? That hurts him as well. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that they report on themselves on that doesn't make them look good. Is it all plausible deniability?
Argument from exception. Just because there isn't perfect unity or that sometimes some stories come out which make them look bad doesn't disprove the general rule.
Dustin, I have a question. I'm curious.
Okay, go, Andrew.
I'm curious. Do you believe that in China, the state broadcaster can just broadcast whatever it wants and whatever it discovers, or do you believe it has to work within an official narrative from the government?
In China, I think they probably have to work with official narratives from the government. This media probably works close with the state.
And what about in Russia?
Yes. For publications like RT, yes.
Saudi?
I don't know as much about Saudi media, but that would be my assumption. It's a total monarchy, yeah.
But in the West, not at all, 0%, right?
Well, it depends on the country you're talking about. Like the BBC gets state funding. I don't think they get state direction. PBS gets state funding. I don't think they get state direction. I think in general in the West, I don't think the media tends to operate at the behest of the state. Whereas like in monarchies or dictatorships, you tend to operate more with what the state is telling you to do, yes.
Well, we could ask why you'd get state funding without state direction. That's one question. But so you're
because of legislation from Congress that authorizes state funding. I mean, it's not really a huge conspiracy.
Of course, yeah, they just give money for nothing. Yes, fine.
I'm sorry. Do you think the most wealthy broadcasters work for PBS and NPR?
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I want to try.
I know you don't.
I want to try and get to the end of the point, especially because I'm driving. So, do you think that would allow a country to be competitive, considering that you need to have narrative control over your populace? And that we now know, and everyone in the West accepts, that China has narrative control over its populace via the state broadcaster, as does Russia, as does Saudi Arabia, as do all these other countries. And that having a news broadcasting apparatus which told the truth, even if it's against national security interests, would not allow you to be competitive as a nation state. Do you think that we're going to allow that to happen just because we care about truth so much?
No, because the West doesn't run the world because they dominate the narrative. The West runs the world because they dominate it militarily and economically.
So, of course, there's no official narrative, and American soft power is meaningless. Yeah, right.
People don't like the United States because we've got the most bought and paid for media. They like the United States because we have the strongest navy that guarantees the most free passage through water. Because when the Houthis start firing missiles at people, it's U.S. destroyers that show up and save the waterways. They like the United States because we are a massive trading partner. We have the highest GDP in the world at this point, and we buy and sell goods like crazy. That's why people like us, not because we poison our media, but because we actually put out good results. You can't control the media. You can't media frame the way out of like horrible participation in a world economy. You just have to like actually be able to put up the numbers.
No, I don't think you understood the point I'm asking, because America as a country is in competition with other nation states, right?
No, but we don't compete on who can control the narrative. That's shit you do on Twitter and YouTube. We compete on who has the highest number of exports. We compete on who can facilitate like the largest like multilateral trade deals. We compete on who can guarantee safe passage through waterways. And people start blowing each other up, whose military is going to show up to make sure that your ships are safe. Those are the things that we compete on.
Cool.
Yeah, Destiny literally arguing that America doesn't compete with other countries in terms of soft power. Ridiculous.
Understand. So you think that America has no vested interest in controlling the narratives that its own population believes in, although the CIA spends basically unlimited money ensuring that vested interests are installed in every other nation state around the world.
If you
they
think
don't care about their own at all.
Yeah.
They don't care about what Americans think at all. They just care about all the other countries think. Yeah,
if you think the CIA spends unlimited money, it's because you don't know what unlimited money looks like, and you have no idea what the scale is between like CIA spending and spending of companies like Facebook or Apple or Microsoft or Amazon.
And here you have it, the final proof that Destiny is a bad faith Fed apologist. He's quibbling over the word Andrew Tate just used, unlimited, and not answering the fact that, yeah, Destiny is trying to create the impression in the mind of the listener that America doesn't have any sort of vested interest in controlling narrative, that America has no soft power. That, America is this perfectly free and objective place, and you shouldn't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. Anyway, this whole thing was way longer. I think there's still like an hour more to go. But this video of me responding to it is already long enough as is. You can go ahead and tell me in the comment section if you want me to cover more of this exchange, and I will get around to it at some point. But anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share it. That is the #1 way you can help me grow this channel, and Red Channels will catch you in the next one.